In this lecture, you will understand the anatomy of a SAM template file. This is the file that is used by SAM deploy command to create the entire stack of resources that are required for our Lambda function to work. This is a superset of CloudFormation template. It is much easier to use and configure. With a few elements in the SAM template file, we can accomplish a lot of work. To master the SAM template anatomy, launch your web browser and search for SAM template anatomy, or AWS SAM template would be better. AWS SAM template anatomy. Click on this very first link which says AWS SAM template anatomy. This might change in time, but the basics and the foundations will still remain the same. The two important elements within every SAM template file, the mandatory elements, are the transform element and then the resources element. You can see it in the documentation as well. Right now we have very minimum here. The very first line tells which version of CloudFormation template we are using. AWS template format version is this, and then this transform element tells that this template is of type AWS serverless template and it needs to be transformed to CloudFormation. The description is not mandatory. Even if you delete this, it will work. It explains any other developer or DevOps engineer or AWS engineer to know what this Lambda exactly does. So you can describe your Lambda function right here, and the resources section is mandatory. This is where we'll define our Lambda functions and other resources like SQS, SNS, whatever we have to do with our Lambda function. All those resources can be defined under the resource section. Hello world function is the name of the resource. Type AWS serverless function. That is the type of the resource. And these are the properties for this Lambda function. Code URI, where the code can be found. Handler, you already know this. The package name, the class name, and then the name of the function, which is hello. Runtime, Java 11. If you want to change it to Java 8, you simply change this from 11 to 8. And the memory size which you need for this Lambda function is 512 MB. That can be changed as well. In lectures later on, you will be adding more resources here and other sections from the Lambda function. Especially if you see this globals section, this global section can be used up top and you can define properties that can be applied across resources. Similarly, you have parameters section where you can dynamically pass parameters. When you do a SAM deploy -- guided, you will be able to pass some parameters that will be used when the stack is being deployed or when these resources are being created. If you scroll down, you can see all the elements that can be used within a SAM template. Global, description, we have already learned that. Metadata about the template. Parameters, as I have already mentioned. Mappings, conditions, you can conditionally execute some logic. Then resources, and finally outputs. You have seen this output section as well when API gateway was a part of this configuration, and we will be using it in sections later on. But as you can see, if you scroll down, the explanation for each of them is available. Only the transform is required, and then if you scroll down further, only the resources section is required. Only those two are the required sections. All the other sections or elements are optional. As you can see, you can read more from this documentation. At any point, if you want to validate your SAM template, you can do it using the SAM command. Go to the command line, clear this up. SAM -- help. Let me get that right. Help. You see this validate? You can use this to validate a AWS SAM template. If you are under your project directory, first Lambda, you can execute SAM validate and it will automatically look for the template.yaml file and it will make sure that it is a valid YAML file. Once it finishes, we should see a message. There we go. It says template.yaml is a valid SAM template. Now let's see what happens if we remove this resources section completely. Save it, go back, try to validate. This time it should fail and show us what the problem is. There we go. It is red. Template provided is this, and it says invalid template exception. Resources section is required. Isn't that cool? Now go back, put that back, save it, execute that again, and it will be valid. So in this lecture, you have learned the basics of the SAM template.yaml and the two mandatory things, this transform and this resources section. And we will be adding more elements in lectures later on.